The house felt overwhelmingly quiet after the funeral, each room heavy with memories of a life that had quietly slipped away. I sat alone at the dining table, gazing at a half-drunk cup of coffee, feeling more lost than I ever imagined I could. Loneliness wrapped around me like a thick, suffocating fog. Just when I thought the night might consume me entirely, there came a soft knock at the door. Confused and cautious, I opened it to find my son's best friend standing there, his eyes holding something I couldn't quite place, something that would change everything. The sight of him standing there sent a strange chill through me. Jason, my son's best friend, looked different in the porch light. Gone was the lanky teenager who used to raid our fridge and crash on the living room couch after endless hours of video games. In his place stood a tall, broad-shouldered man, his face carrying the weight of someone who had lived and felt the world's burdens. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The night air hung heavy, filled with unsaid words. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said at last, his voice deeper and steadier than I remembered. I nodded, unable to find my voice. Grief had taken so much from me, my husband, my laughter, my sense of belonging, and now even my words. Jason shifted, awkwardly holding something small in his hand. "I brought you something," he said, offering it to me. A homemade casserole. The gesture, so small and yet so profound, cracked the fragile barrier I had carefully built around myself. "Thank you," I murmured, stepping aside to let him in. The house seemed to absorb him instantly, as if starved for life and sound. He placed the casserole on the kitchen counter and turned to me, his face full of concern. "How are you holding up?" he asked gently, his eyes searching mine in a way that made me feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in weeks. I managed a tight, humorless smile. "Surviving," I whispered, my voice breaking on the word. Jason hesitated, then did something unexpected. He reached out and touched my hand, not briefly, but in a steady, grounding way that sent a shiver through me. I wanted to pull away, to retreat into my sorrow, but something inside me resisted. I needed this touch. I needed to be reminded that I was still here. "Do you want me to stay for a while?" he asked softly, almost shyly, as though afraid to intrude. I glanced around at the empty house, at the photo frames still hanging on the walls, and felt the silence pressing down on me again. "Yes," I said before I could second-guess myself. "Please." We moved to the living room, a space filled with both comfort and sorrow. Jason sat on the edge of the couch while I curled up on the other side, pulling a blanket over my lap. For a few moments we simply sat there, the only sounds the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old house settling. It felt strangely natural to have him there, like a bridge between the life I had lost and whatever uncertain future awaited me. We began talking, starting with the mundane, how he was adjusting to his new job, how the neighborhood had changed while he was away at college. But little by little, the conversation ventured into deeper territory. He asked about my husband, what I missed most. It was a simple question, but it cracked something wide open inside me. I found myself talking about things I had kept buried for fear that speaking them aloud would make me break. The late-night laughter, the quiet mornings, the knowing glances that communicated everything without a single word. Jason listened without interruption, without any attempt to offer solutions. He just listened, his presence so steady and complete that it made my chest ache with the weight of it. And then, when the words finally ran dry, he leaned in slightly and said, "You can miss him and still need someone." The words hit me like a raw truth, so painfully honest that I had to close my eyes for a moment just to steady myself. When I opened them, I saw him closer than before, his face shadowed, but his eyes shining with something that wasn't pity, only understanding and an unspoken offering of comfort. In that instant, it felt like I was standing on the edge of something both dangerous and beautiful, something that could either heal me or pull me deeper into pain. My heart hammered in my chest, uncertain but somehow open. It had been so long since anyone had looked at me like that, like I wasn't something to be pitied, but something to be wanted. I felt my breath catch in my throat, the electric tension between us tangible, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to ask, what if moving forward didn't mean forgetting? What if it meant discovering something new, something gentle and healing, amidst the wreckage of what had been lost? Jason must have seen something shift in my eyes because he smiled, a slow, tentative smile that seemed to hold 1,000 unsaid promises. My pulse quickened. I didn't know where this night was going, but for the first time I wasn't afraid. I was alive, and I was ready to feel again. Jason shifted slightly, his knee brushing against mine. The accidental touch made my breath hitch. It would have been so easy to pull away, to create some space between us and pretend that nothing had happened. But I didn't. I stayed there, feeling the warmth of his skin against mine, letting it fill the cold, empty spaces inside me. His gaze met mine, careful and searching, offering me every chance to pull back, to say no. But I stayed frozen, my heart pounding louder than any words I could have said. Without thinking, I reached out, my fingers brushing his hand lightly, curling around it. His hand was warm, steady, and slightly calloused, a stark contrast to the fragile vulnerability I felt inside. He responded by turning his palm upward, intertwining his fingers with mine. The simple act, so intimate, made my throat tighten with emotion. I had forgotten what it felt like to be touched like this, not out of obligation, but out of genuine care, out of presence. Jason moved closer, bridging the last bit of distance between us. Slowly, almost hesitantly, his hand lifted to tuck a stray strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers barely touched my skin, but it was enough to send a shiver racing down my spine. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, his eyes heavy with meaning. He whispered, "You are so beautiful." His voice filled with something that bordered on awe. No one had spoken to me like that in years, not with such raw, unguarded sincerity. The words hit me like a wave, and the tears began to sting my eyes, but I blinked them away, refusing to let them fall. Instead, I leaned into his touch, allowing his hand to gently cradle my cheek. The world outside seemed to vanish. No more grief, no more loneliness, no more endless condolences that felt empty and distant, until there was only this moment, just him and me, and the tender possibility that hung between us. He moved closer, his breath warm against my lips. There was a pause, a brief hesitation, as though he were offering me one final chance to back away. But I didn't want that. I closed the distance, pressing my lips softly to his. The kiss began gently, tentative, as if we were both afraid the other might pull away. But when I tilted my head to deepen the kiss, he responded with an intensity that sent my heart racing. His arms enveloped me, pulling me closer, and for the first time in ages, I felt truly held, deeply and completely held. The kiss grew more urgent, more desperate, as if we were both trying to make up for lost time. My hand slid up his chest, feeling the solid strength beneath his shirt, grounding me in a way I hadn't realized I was craving. He pulled back just enough to meet my gaze, searching my eyes for any trace of doubt. But all he would have found was a yearning, a deep, undeniable longing to feel alive again, to feel wanted, to feel seen. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice low and rough. I nodded, unable to speak, the words caught in my throat. And that was all the permission he needed. He stood, gently pulling me to my feet, and led me toward the staircase. Each step was heavy with anticipation, each glance exchanged between us, thick with unspoken promises. By the time we reached my bedroom, my hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the exhilarating rush of what was about to happen. Jason was careful, almost reverent, as he helped me out of my cardigan, his fingers brushing my skin, leaving trails of fire in their wake. He kissed the hollow of my throat, the curve of my shoulder, taking his time as if savoring every inch of me. I responded in kind, my hands threading through his hair, exploring the strong curve of his back, feeling the way his muscles tightened and relaxed beneath my touch. When he finally laid me down on the bed, it was with a tenderness that made my heart ache. He hovered above me for a moment, his eyes drinking me in as if committing every detail to memory. "You are incredible," he whispered, and the awe in his voice made me believe it too, at least for tonight. The rest of our clothes came off slowly, unhurriedly, each piece discarded like the shedding of old lives, old pains. When he touched me, it wasn't with the eager rush of youth, but with a deep, aching care that left no part of me untouched or unloved. Every kiss, every touch, every soft word was like a balm to the wounds I had carried, hidden, untouched, for so long. The physical connection between us was electric, but it was the emotional intimacy that truly unraveled me. The way he looked into my eyes and never once looked away. The way he made me feel like I wasn't broken or pitied, but cherished. Our bodies moved together in a rhythm as ancient as the earth itself, a slow, sensual dance that grew with each passing moment, building until it consumed us both. When I finally cried out his name, it wasn't just release I felt. It was a rebirth, a reclaiming of a part of myself I had thought lost forever. Afterward, we lay tangled in each other, our breaths slowing, the room filled with a soft golden silence. Jason traced his fingers lightly along my arm, tender and slow, as though reluctant to let go. I rested my head against his chest, the steady beat of his heart a comforting lullaby beneath my ear. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel the crushing weight of loneliness bearing down on me. Instead, I felt warmth, grounding, the quiet assurance of being held. He kissed the top of my head and whispered, "You are not alone anymore." I closed my eyes, allowing the truth of his words to wash over me. In just one night, Jason had reminded me that love could take many forms, and that healing, though messy and complicated, was still possible. I had spent so long mourning what was lost that I had forgotten how to hope for what might be found. Wrapped in his arms, I finally allowed myself to believe that life could still hold unexpected beauty, even after all the sorrow. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to find it again. The first light of morning crept quietly into the room, casting a soft glow over the tangled sheets and the lingering warmth of the night before. I stirred slightly, half expecting to wake up alone, bracing myself for the emptiness that had become my constant companion. But Jason was still there, his arm draped protectively over me, his breath slow and steady against my hair. For a moment, I simply existed in the safety of his embrace, not questioning, not doubting, just feeling. Yet even as my body relaxed against his, my mind began its restless unraveling. Reality, as it always did, insisted on being faced. I was older, scarred, carrying a lifetime of experiences he could never fully understand. What we had shared the night before was beautiful, sacred even, but could it survive outside the fragile cocoon we had woven around ourselves in the dark? Fear crept in slowly, insidiously, filling the empty spaces in my heart with cold uncertainty. Jason stirred, sensing the shift in me. His fingers brushed lightly down my arm. "Penny for your thoughts," he murmured, his voice thick with sleep. I smiled faintly, tracing patterns on his chest. How could I explain that I was terrified? That no matter how tender he was, part of me couldn't shake the fear that this was just a fleeting moment, a beautiful illusion that daylight would shatter? "I was just thinking," I said softly, choosing my words carefully, "that last night felt too good to be real." Jason gently lifted my chin, guiding me to meet his eyes. There was no hesitation, no flicker of doubt, just unwavering sincerity. "It was real," he said firmly. "Every second of it." Still, doubts gnawed at me. What would others think if they knew? Would they see me as desperate, clinging to a fleeting touch to ease my loneliness? Would Jason one day wake up and realize he deserved someone younger, someone less complicated? I pulled the blanket tighter around myself as though I could shield my heart from whatever pain might come. Sensing the change in me, Jason shifted slightly, propping himself up on one elbow. "You're overthinking again," he said with a gentle smile. "You do that when you're scared." I blinked, surprised at how easily he understood me. "Maybe I am scared," I confessed. "You're young. You have your whole life ahead of you. I don't want to be a mistake you regret." His expression softened, and he reached up to cup my cheek. "You are not a mistake," he said, his thumb gently brushing away a tear I hadn't even noticed had fallen. "You're the bravest, most beautiful woman I know." Last night wasn't about filling a void, it was about finding something real. I wanted so badly to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But old wounds had a way of whispering lies when the silence was too loud. I turned my face into his palm, soaking in the warmth of his touch, trying to quiet the voices of doubt that seemed to echo inside me. "What happens now?" I whispered. "When the world comes back in? When it's not just you and me in this room?" Jason hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "I don't have all the answers," he admitted. "But I know what I feel, and I'm not walking away from this, from you." His words settled over me like a balm, comforting but not erasing the uncertainty that still clung to me. Later, as we dressed and moved through the motions of an ordinary morning, there was a quiet weight between us, unspoken but palpable. Every brush of his hand, every lingering glance felt charged, as if something profound had shifted between us. We weren't just two lonely people finding comfort anymore. We were connected now, in a way that both terrified and reassured me. A knock at the door startled us both. Jason glanced at me, silently asking if I wanted him to answer it. I shook my head, pulling on my sweater and smoothing my hair. Whoever it was could wait. I needed a moment to collect myself, to decide how much of the magic of last night I was willing to let the world see. But deep down, I knew the real battle wasn't about what others would think. It was about my own fear. Fear of being vulnerable again. Fear of hoping. Fear of opening my heart to something I couldn't control. Jason came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Whatever comes next," he said quietly, "we'll face it together." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of a promise I didn't even realize I needed so desperately. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself lean into that promise. I allowed myself to believe, not in fairy tales or perfect endings, but in the messy, beautiful possibility of something real, something worth fighting for. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The days that followed weren't easy, but they were real. There were moments of hesitation, of second-guessing, of wondering if what had started between us could survive beyond that one night. But Jason never wavered. When I pulled away out of fear, he gently pulled me back with patience. When I doubted, he reminded me, with small gestures and steady words, that love doesn't always arrive the way we expect. Sometimes it slips quietly through the cracks of a broken heart and plants itself stubbornly, beautifully, against all odds. We kept our connection private, savoring the moments that only we knew about, the glances across a room, the stolen touches, the late-night conversations that mended the wounded parts of us. There were challenges, of course, but we faced them hand in hand, knowing that what we had wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Jason never made me feel like a burden or a mistake. He made me feel seen, wanted, loved, not despite my scars, but because of them. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the world in soft gold, Jason took my hand in his and said, "You saved me too, you know." I smiled through the tears that welled up in my eyes, realizing that maybe this wasn't just about healing old wounds. Maybe it was about building something new, something neither of us had dared to dream of, but both of us needed more than we ever knew.